How's the form of you today?
All's good. All's good, man. How are you?
Yeah, very well. Good Fridays. I do like to do them on a Friday and a Saturday. Get the
Nice.
week out of the way.
And
We're relaxed.
do you bank up a few of them at once?
Yeah, I'm trying to because it can be quite consuming.
Yeah.
Like if you do one here and then it's just it takes up a lot of mental space. So like doing
Yeah.
them all together and then just like getting way ahead. So I'm trying to get way ahead of myself. Like 2 months recorded.
Yeah.
And then
Nice.
it just gives a nice cushion to not always feel like, oh, I need to be keep. So you
Yeah,
can do
yeah.
other things as well.
I'm the same with like content. I'm always trying to at least be a week or 2 weeks ahead of myself. The worst thing is it being a Friday or whatever, and you're needing content, and you're rushing then, or you're rushing to get something up. Like so, the more you can plan ahead in advance, the better.
Yeah, but I have to say you're very good at content. Like because man, fuck, it's work. Like,
Yeah, it's work. Yeah, I'm looking at. I suppose there's a couple avenues I can pull from. Like I can use it. So when I look at the week, like I'm trying to maybe get. I'll try and maybe upload every second day. So 4 videos a week would be great. 3 reels would be fine. Four would be great, and like maybe two cooking, two like training or general life to life or day to day, or there could be a business one in there, or it could be a recap of a TV episode. So I'm looking like where I can kind of pull from different pieces, and there's times in the year where I'll have loads of training clips, or there's times in the year where I have very little training clips, and it's all food. Then and then it's trying to find the balance of what does well metrically on social media. So food does well, obviously, and to build a brand, you kind of have to keep the training and the day to day and the life parts. You have to try to give a background to everything as well.
yeah. Do you enjoy that process?
I do, yeah. I actually didn't. I love it. I love making content, but I fell out of love with it there maybe 2 years ago. And I think it was because I think the pressure was kind of off me. I think and when I started on social media and I was building a following, like I put an awful lot of pressure on it to work. I posted every day for 2.5 years, I think, never missed a day. And it was constantly in the metrics, constantly forecasting recipes, getting posts done, drafting up schedules. And it was to build an audience, to gather an audience. And I think like I'm obviously nowhere near what I want, but I got to a certain point where I was really happy with the audience I had, like over 20,000 followers, and I suppose able to monetize that, and it didn't. I probably held put an awful lot of value in that, um, and I kind of lost the value in that for a while, so I stopped posting, and even when I was posting, it was just paid adverts, which drives your engagement down more than anything else, to be honest with you. And if you're just doing ads, your engagement goes to the ground because people will just kind of flick past an ad. So there was probably a 2 year space there where I wasn't really enjoying it. I was doing it for monetization and I was loosely documenting, but probably I say the middle, maybe the start of last year, I started kind of went back to doing more training vlogs and day in the lives, and I played more into the nutrition side of things. Also, a piece there is that I purposely stayed away from like healthy nutrition focused meals because I didn't want to be pigeonholed as the Joe Wicks of Ireland. Now in hindsight, I should have just doubled down on that because now I've kind of come back around to be like that's what I do anyway. It's what I eat, and I'm not trying to make up a facade of who I'm trying to be here. It's genuinely my life anyway. So I think when I kind of just acknowledged that and went back into that system again, the content started flowing. That started flowing. Yeah, it's a balancing act for me between when busyness and stress goes up, my creativeness goes down, which is normal. It's for anyone. As soon as your stress comes in, your creative edge just goes away, and you're kind of all of your mental cognitive function goes into the stress, into the busyness, and there's no space for creativity. So I used to find that when we got quieter in work, my creativeness would be much higher. So it ebbs and flows, but I've I think the last maybe 8 months, I've had a really good feel for it, and the engagement and the followers have grown proportionally to that. So, that kind of it shows you're doing something right.
Mm. Yeah, you really have to enjoy it. But like, I see the content you create. You have to be recording a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
I've tried a little bit of that. It's just like, nah. It's just for me. It was pulling on me. So it's
yeah,
like you have to find what works for you. For me, this
yeah,
is it. Having a conversation. I can find the value in that, and then just pulling little moments from that. So yeah.
yeah. I was the same. I didn't like there was a time where I felt pressure to be recording everything that I did. And like, if you're at social events and stuff, the last thing you want to do is take your phone out and be the wanker talking to your phone in the middle of an audience or bringing people in. There's a real fine line there, and I didn't enjoy that. So I suppose that was forceful for me. Whereas now, like clips are a lot of my edits are like a 5 second clip, and there's no audio, so I might be in the kitchen. I'll take a picture. I'll take a video of me running, a video of me on the bike, a video of me cooking, and then I'll voice over that. So it's a much less invasive way of documenting, I find, as opposed to I'll do the pieces of camera, and I do love talking to camera, but I suppose the environment has to be right for that. It can be daunting and it can be a bit of a nuisance and a burden to constantly be like, right, yeah, I need to make sure I get 4 or 5 minutes worth of footage today. I reference these three bits because you're kind of always thinking of the end edit. How will this look? What's the edit? What's the process? Like you said, there it is it's more organization and process control and the creative editing than anything else.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, look, that's all valuable content there too.
Yeah,
We'll get the conversation going.
clip it.
We will, we will. I'll say to the editor. Owen Sheehan, a pleasure to have you here today. How are you keeping?
I'm good, right, man. Thank you for having me.
Before you started Country Munch, where did you think life was taking you?
I thought I'd be a professional athlete. I thought I'd play rugby. When I was from the ages of 12 to 17, all I wanted to do was to play rugby. I'd say play sports, but rugby was the most prominent sport at that time. Like as a child, I would have dabbled in loads of sports, but rugby was the one that I was prevailing in. So yeah, like prior to Country Munch, I never did. I did home ec up until like third year. Never did a cookery course. Didn't really cook, to be honest with you. Didn't have much of an interest in nutrition. My life revolved around training and getting the training and rugby. And yeah, it took a bit of a pivot at the end of my teenage years, coming into my early 20s. And yeah, all for the better, all part of the plan, I suppose.
So you're always a chef as such. You said you did a bit of home ec.
I did home ec in, yeah, first year to third year, so from the age of 14 to 16. Chef is being super generous there now. I made some pretty basic soups and I learned to crochet, and that was the extent of my home ec experience. But I did really enjoy it. It's funny, it was only me and one other fella. There were only two fellas. That was probably half the reason I did it as well. It was all women, and just me and another fella were in the class. So I didn't keep it on for the final 2 years of school. I went into like engineering was probably I was more interested in engineering and metalwork at the time, so I think I chose them over home ec. And home ec is only like 20% cooking, and there's an awful lot of theory and knitting and crocheting. So yeah, it didn't really scratch the itch back then, but my very fond memories of it, I did really enjoy it.
It's unusual for lads to pick home ec because you'll your
Yeah,
mates will definitely slag you. I
yeah, yeah.
assume maybe not, but I mean that was something that I was aware of anyway.
Yeah, I don't remember. I don't remember getting much of a slag. I think maybe we all had to do it for a while, and I definitely kept it on. No, like I always say, I learned some great life skills. Home ec should nearly be compulsory for a year because students will learn how to feed themselves. They learn how to stitch their clothes. You learn loads of like basic economic stuff and shopping and money management. There's probably there's probably a subsection subject there where it's not just home ec, it's like life skills 101 that nearly every student should be made do, because whether we liked it or not, we got some good life skills there. I didn't know at the time. I think obviously in hindsight, if I stayed on and did the extra 2 years of home ec, I may have learned more, but I don't think any of my culinary skills I can draw from the home ec. But yeah, I don't know what the initial intrigue was. Maybe it was that I was interested in cooking. It wasn't definitely the defining factor. Possibly I thought it would be an easy one to pick points up on in the junior cert or whatever it was. But yeah, it's funny, I often reference it. It was probably the first time I was ever exposed to the kitchen or cooking. But yeah, only for the first 3 years.
Mm. When I look back, I wish I did do it because
Yeah,
kicking or because cooking is one of the hardest things for me. It was one of the hardest things for me to allow to come in because I found at the start it's really really hard. It kept making mistakes and that like if I'd learned them life skills, I mean I could cook basic, but when I tried to cook meals that maybe might be more enjoyable, it was really difficult and it was just one of the things like you know what I wish I did home ec, when I was younger. So I definitely agree. If they did make it compulsory, it's definitely a
yeah.
good life skill.
Well, like half of my job now is making up for that for students. So, like now I give a lot of cookery demonstrations and these kind of cooking tutorials, and a lot of it is in universities to first year students that, like me, I suppose when I went to college, I was the same. Now, I probably had a better starting point, but 90% of them, fellas in particular, will leave, their home. So leave mammy's dinners. So mammy's not cooking for them anymore. They'll move to University of Limerick or Cork or Galway or Belfast or Dublin, wherever they go. They're probably moving with their friends to a flat or dorm or apartment. And have never cooked for themselves, never did a shop, never did a budget for a food shop for a week. Might not have much of a insight on nutrition or fueling themselves. And I suppose I'm brought in now to give a kind of a crash course on, right, here's 3 dinners that we can make this week that'll take you 40 minutes. They'll cost you less than a fiver each. They'll refrigerate really well, and you don't have to, go to culinary school for this. So like a lot of my job is teaching those skills later on in life. And it's I will mention there, like I've met 16-year-olds that I teach this to, and I've met 50-year-olds that I teach this to. The it's a universal language. Cooking. You nearly have to learn to feed yourself. When you learn is just important. The earlier the better, and you'll probably get a little bit more enjoyment out of it.
Mm.
And the last piece to that is that you don't have to love it. You just have to do it. So my job isn't to convince them to love and take up cooking. My job is just to be, look, you have to eat at some point this week. You'll save money if you cook for yourselves. There might be a nutritional element to it. And then here's 3 easy recipes. So I always say, like, it's not my job to convince you to love cooking. It's just my job to help you to cook for yourself. And if you're good at it, you might only have to cook once every 3 days. Great. Less cooking for you.
Mm. What is it about food that pulls you in?
Initially, food was the leverage point that I saw a huge change in myself. So when I left school, I went to University of Limerick and I went to study to be a chemical and biochemical engineer, furthest thing away from food, and never had much of an interest in engineering. I was decent at engineering in school. I liked metalwork. I was good at the sciences. I liked chemistry. So I kind of put two and two together. Chemical engineering, perfect. Googled the salary. It was a good salary. This is perfect. And my logic was, by the time I'm out of college, I'll sure I'll be playing rugby professionally and I won't need this degree. And UL is the home of Munster Rugby. So I was like, this is perfect. They're going to see me someday and just pick me up. Never happened. But when I left and moved to college, was the first time I properly had to actually look at my food. You're spoiled when you live at home because the fridge is always full. Mom always had the fridge stocked. Bread was always there. We live on a farm in West Limerick. So we had our own eggs, we had our own beef, we had our own vegetable garden. So I never had to think about it. So when the first time I left, and I'll preference that, was I was 17 and 17 stone. I was 18 and 18 stone. So I was a big prop forward going into college. I was near 100 kilos. I was 98 and get my heaviest. And when I had to start cooking and start to learn for myself and fend for myself and just YouTube recipes, food was the first point of call that I saw drastic change in how I looked. And there probably was a link there of how I looked, impacted how I felt, impacted my confidence, impacted my performance. And that all stemmed from the food that I was cooking in the kitchen. So I initially got a really positive correlation to cooking and to food. And it was, I won't say it was easy for me, but it made sense. It was like, wow, this is cool. If I prep 5 dinners and I know the calorie content, I know what I'm eating, I know I'll lose weight. And then when and I don't like saying this, but if I know I lose weight, I'll know I feel better and look better. There's a caveat there where that can turn toxic. But at that point in my life, it was weight loss gave me a more positive perspective and gave me a positive outlook. So that was my first, I suppose, experience with food held the keys for unlocking who I was.
You mentioned confidence there too,
Mm,
but also you were hoping to be picked up in the rugby game. So I
yeah,
assuming for the role that you had, that was the body type that was best suited.
for
But
sure.
also
Yeah,
there
yeah.
was a balance there where I think I heard just like the confidence of being in that body at the time.
Yeah, so like that was the catch 22 for me was if I wanted to play rugby, I needed the weight. And that's why I never really knew I was that overweight. And like I wasn't morbidly obese, but I was a big, burly young fella. Um, and that was probably, pardon the pun, it was sugar coated because I was good at rugby. No one ever highlighted that I was overweight. They would just reference, oh, sure, he's the rugby player. He needs the weight. Sure, he's a prop forward. They have to be big fellas. No one expected me to be the slim, strong, toned guy. It was bigger is better. And that's what we were always told, bigger is better, pack it on. So it never was an issue in that regard. And then when I started to lose weight, it became an issue. Like here, I came back. I remember after first year in college, I came back to play rugby the next season, and it was probably at like the worst time where you're going from under 21s straight to senior. There's no middle ground there, so there's a huge jump for a 21 year old because you go playing seconds or you go playing firsts if you're good enough. So I had left the under 21s where
Who
you're
with?
fine. Gary Owen in rugby. Sorry, in Limerick, Gary Owen rugby in Limerick, and I was playing a bit of college rugby too. So I left the 21s, and then you're thrown into the deep end with the seniors, and I had come back in that year. I think 25 kilos lighter. I was much lighter. I was visibly smaller. So they had the conversation. They put me aside, and they were like, "Look, if you want to keep this train going, you need to put back on weight." And it was just going against everything that I wanted at the time. The everything positive for me was coming from this new way of life. I had lost weight, I looked better, I was getting more attention. As a young 20-year-old, attention was what I wanted really from women and from social media. So it was really a positive feedback loop. And I had just started maybe the idea of Country Munch, which is meal prep service, where I was selling dinners. Never really had much of intention behind it, but I was selling dinners to friends and I was making a couple £100 a week just because I was making dinners for myself. So I didn't know at the time, but I was in I started a business by accident. So yeah, so when they sat me on there, look, you're gonna have to probably go back up to mid 90s. I remember thinking like, no, I can't do that. Like, there's no way everything I've done for the last year will kind of be for nothing. So, like, there's probably an intermediary year there where I changed position and I went playing back row, and then I was put second center, and then I was put in the wing. And I was only playing for like seconds and thirds now, and then I was sub hooker for a while. And I knew then I was like, yeah, no, I had come to terms that I had made peace with it. My career in rugby isn't gonna go ahead. But to be honest with you, I was so focused on everything else. I was okay with it. I knew at that point, I was like, no, this avenue that I'm in now is for me.
Sounds like it happened organically.
100%. Yeah, yeah. There was nothing forceful about it. It happened before I even knew it. You know,
Mm.
everyone could see it, and there was no like there was never any bad blood or anything. It was very much the time was right.
Yeah. So you didn't foresee Country Munch. It just happened to
Not in
unfold
the
the way
slightest.
it
It
did.
came from me needing a couple of quid to go out on Thursday night. To be honest with you, yeah, I was cooking dinners in my college
What
house
what
in
age were you
Limerick.
at the time?
So I was in first year in college, so I would have been 19, 19, 20, I suppose, and was just meal prepping my own dinners. And I suppose that was the beginning of. I was lucky too, like it's kind of early days social media was. So Snapchat was kind of big back then. Instagram was just getting a bit of momentum itself. So I was just super organically just posting stories and documenting. A lot of the documenting back then was around the gym. I was doing YouTube a lot. I was doing vlogs every week on YouTube, more so around training, not really around the food. I didn't really care too much about the food, to be honest with you. I wanted to be the PT and the fitness guy. So I would post like 4 videos of the gym and it would get moderate views. And I would post a recipe and that would get high views. So then I was like, geez, there's probably something to the food thing here. Every time, and I'm like nearly annoyed, like, fuck it, like the breakfast got more views than me squatting. Um, so then after a while, I was like, right, there's probably something to this. And when I looked at the landscape, everybody wanted to be a PT or a fitness influencer or the gym person, but very few, especially young males, were in the food scene. At that time in particular, there was food blogs were popular, but I didn't know of anyone else doing what I was doing. So then there was the decision, okay, right, I'll lean into the food more. I'll post more recipes, post what I eat. And then a friend just texted me. He's like, look, would you make me 5 dinners? I'll He worked in a factory, he was working 12-hour shifts and he was trying to lose a little bit of weight. The canteen food wasn't great at night. So initially, I think I said no. I was like, "Look, man, I'm up the walls. Like, I'm trying to be an engineer. I'm trying to start this Instagram page. Blah blah blah." He said, "I'll give you a tenner a meal." I was like, "No bother, man. I'll cook. I'll cook for you as long as you want." So he gave me 50 quid. I made him 5 dinners. I couldn't tell you what they were. Dropped him out to his house. He was local. Um, and I did that for a few weeks. And then a buddy of his in work said he'd do the same. So then I made 10 dinners. I got 100 quid that week. Oh, cash. I was like, this is this is savage. I hadn't a clue what I was doing. But that was, like, I really, there was so much excitement. Like, as you know, the excitement of a startup is so hard to recreate. So then I suppose after a couple months, I was showcasing this on my socials. Like, oh yeah, look, just by the way, I'm cooking a few dinners for a few friends here. Anyone wants a dinner, DM me, shoot me a message. 3 people might say, yeah, I'll take 3 dinners. So then I was, really, I had built this kind of authentic audience, relatively small still, but they were local. They were following me for a while, so they knew the beginning of it. And I was a really good kind of carbon copy of what I was doing. I was overweight. I had lost a lot of weight, and the food was the reason I lost it. So it was a really easy sales pitch at the beginning. It was like, this is the food I eat. This is how I used to look. This is how I look now. If you want to do that, buy a dinner. So then it was just boom, 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 selling dinners just through social media, and did that during college. The last year of college, I took it seriously, and we got a kitchen and whatnot. But the first 2 years, I was just having a bit of crack, cooking dinners, freezing them down. Me and my mother would deliver them. I went home to Mam's kitchen. Her kitchen was destroyed in Tupperware and boxes. Probably didn't make much money. I had no idea of like margins or profit margins or anything. I was just having fun. But yeah, it was a super accidental, organic way to start the business.
What were the biggest challenges you faced starting out?
I was still studying to be a chemical engineer, which is a pretty intensive course. So like that alone was a challenge. Was I am needed in college Monday to Friday from 9 to 4. So already it's a big gap in my day gone. So if I need to cook meals today, I'm up early. So I'd like get up at 5, cook from 5 to 9, then go to college from 9 to 4, and in the evening time deliver the meals. So it was a really heavy workload when college was busy. Um, and like the process of scaling that, even like from super small scale to small scale, is difficult. I had no obviously no culinary qualifications, but I also had no like health and safety vetting. I had no right to sale. I didn't even have a limited business, so like the tedious stuff was getting the business formed, getting a kitchen in Limerick that took the bones of a year. We went from cooking in my home house. We needed a bigger place, so then we would go into a restaurant at night time when their kitchen was closed. We'd use their restaurant kitchen from like 12 to 3 or 4, cook the dinners, clean kitchen. They come back in at 6, open up, and then we take our dinners. We'd be gone. So we were like renting spaces throughout the night. It was a really nice like intermediary phase there, where we needed a big kitchen, but we obviously couldn't afford to buy a kitchen or build a kitchen. So we did it for a while, and then fortunately I bit the bullet, took out a loan, built a kitchen in Limerick, an industrial kitchen. They're still there today, 8 years later. They were all tedious things, and then there's the whole element of self-doubt of like, geez, am I overextended here? There's a kind of, it's a real delicate age as well when you're 21, 22, 23, and like, should I just be a chemical engineer and get a safe job and get into the corporate world? Or should I take a chance here, try and start a business in food? The food industry is so fickle as it is, and most restaurants don't work. So there was plenty of over and backward there. I'd have a weekly debrief with myself, being like, "This isn't going to work. Like this, I'm a lunatic." But I had enough safety nets in place. I didn't drop out of college. I got my degree. So worst case scenario, I'd be an engineer. We were bootstrapping everything, so we weren't overextending ourselves financially. And I was really good to ask for help. If anyone came around or if anyone had insights that I didn't, I was a king of cold emails. I'd email everyone asking for tips or tricks or different food businesses, or how did they do this, where did they source this, could I come in for a day and just see what you do? So I did so much on the ground stuff in the early days, just to get exposure. I think it really paid off in the long term.
You did talk about there just having tough moments. Is there a specific moment where you thought, oh, I don't know if this is going to work, or what have I done?
Yeah, there was plenty early days. There was a really prevalent one. And we were about, so I graduated, I don't know when I graduated, 2018, I know, but it's probably say September. And I went full time then, in country Munch, and we were I suppose officially up and running the bones of a year, but like we weren't really, it was very still small scale. But that was the first time ever I was like, right, I have no more college anymore. I have no more safety net. Here we go. And I probably told myself, let's give it a year. If it works, great. If not, fine. And I don't know how we got it. I probably blackguarded my way in, but we got a significantly big contract in school catering, and it was to provide food for a big school caterer that then would repurpose that food and send all over Ireland. They're a huge organization. We were doing like sandwich fillings and like vast, large scale production of like pasta, tuna sweet corn, rices. It was it was very different to what our core business model was, which is the first mistake. It was completely different. I just got in the right place, right time. They offered a contract. It was a lovely big contract, so I probably only saw the money. Now, if I had the wits or the brain power to look at the margins, it was nothing. So, long story short, we got into that, and it took everything. It took all manpower just to get that done, and we were probably only getting it done at like a 70% success rate. It wasn't perfect at all. And I think like there was two of us in the kitchen, and then we started on a Monday, and then by the Wednesday there was 8 of us working in the kitchen. I was just hiring everyone, anyone. I needed hands. I was bringing in family and friends and cousins. Just needed manpower, and like never looked at the expenses or the costs of all this. Just wanted to get it done, and would keep telling myself like next week will be better. I'll put out these 2 fires, and then next week we'll start fresh, and then 2 more fires would start. hypothetical fires would start, the week after. So I think we did that for 6 weeks, and I burnt through all the capital we had. I can't remember, it was a good couple of grand we had built up, and I spent all of that just to get stock and pay wages and to get it up and running, not knowing that this company had a 60-day payment policy. So I spent all our money in the first month. We weren't going to get paid for another probably 2 months. So it was the worst 6 weeks of business I ever did. I was constant stress. I was working every 18-hour days, I'd say. I would go in at 6 in the morning to open up. I'd do the first shift from 6 to 2 with the first maybe 4 staff. Then 4 more staff would come in from 2 to 8. I'd work with them. It wouldn't be done by 8 o'clock, so they'd go home and I'd stay from 8 and I'd work until probably 12 or 1 to get it done and start again next day. It was chaos. And that came to a boiling point where I was, really approaching burnout, was super stressed with like the finances. We'd no money left. I was trying to pay wages and I was, ringing banks to get overdrafts. And I think the big thing was like we were so far away from what we originally started on. We weren't even doing dinners anymore. We weren't even fulfilling orders that were coming in for the meal prep stuff. I had lost sight of the main core business so much by this lucrative carrot being dangled here that we couldn't even do. And I remember, I just had a really bad day. I remember I just burst out crying in the kitchen and I cried for like 12 hours, I'd say. I still worked that day. I had an emotional breakdown. Like I probably was so run down, was so burnt out, and it just came out of me in this emotion. It was in hindsight, it was hilarious. And we were all cooking, 8 of us in there. They're like, "Is he all right?" Like, "I'm fine. Just keep going." And like it went about the day, but I was at my wit's end. I think like that was the Friday, and then probably the following Tuesday, I had a meeting with this company, and they're like, "Look, this isn't working," and I was like, "No, it's not. Like we can't do this." Like I was like, either we're going to be out of business in a month, I'll be in hospital, or especially with food, like someone could get sick, or I got a really bad trigger with my phone from that period because every time my phone rang, it was bad news. It
Mm.
took me, I never realized at the time, but it took me years to realize. Anytime I got a phone call, like up until recently, my gut would sink because it was always bad news. It was staff or it was that company. To make it clear, that company did nothing wrong. They're actually a great company, and I worked with them since. I oversold us big time, and I promised the product that we couldn't fulfill. So they were lovely. In fairness to them, when I went in, I was like, "Look, we are overextended. We've bitten off way more than we could chew." They were great, and they put in like a reverse policy where the quantities went down and down and down until it was zero, and then we just cut ties there. So it wasn't necessarily, we didn't get fucked over by a company. I fucked myself over realistically. But that was a bad 6 weeks. But that day in particular, yeah, that was a really bad day. That was I kind of knew. I was like, no, it's over. Like the money's gone. The business, like we were losing customers I had from day one for meal prep because we just couldn't fulfill the orders because I didn't have time or we didn't have resources. So yeah, that was a bad day, and we got out of that, and it was just, I remember I sat with the chef. He's still our head chef today, Muffy from Morocco, and it was just me and him. Then after this, maybe like 2 weeks had passed, and he was like, like, are we still going to do this? We had no orders that day. It was a Monday. No orders came in. So I was like, yeah, look, let's just go again, let's try again, and we'll build the base up. And we did. We just started back kind of from scratch again and went back to our core business model of doing meals. And thankfully, touch wood, I reached out to a lot of the original customers and they were like, yeah, look, we'll all order again. I ordered last week, but it didn't happen, blah, blah, blah. And yeah, luckily we got it back up and running and for the better, thankfully.
Good resilience there. How did you
Yeah.
manage yourself though through that stressful moment? Was there anything
Oh,
that you know?
I didn't really, man. I didn't have the tools back then. In hindsight, if it was now, I'd have much better coping mechanisms. I number one, I'd be able to foresee the burnout coming. I'd know the triggers. Back then, like exercise is such a huge part of my life where if that leaves, I know things are bad. And at that time, I had just completely stopped exercising. I had no time in the day to train or go to the gym. So like that was the first telltale sign for me. Is like, right, your priorities are out of whack here. Um, and like I wasn't eating well, I wasn't sleeping well. I had no knowledge of like good mental or emotional health at all. Now I would have much better triggers, but back then no, I was on my own realistically, and I was just trying to forge away. All I wanted to do was just like get this working. If I just work for another week, next week will be easier, and it never got easier. You like yourself and you tell yourself all these different things, but the light in the tunnel just wasn't coming. Um,
Mm.
so I have great people around me, and they were super concerned about me, and they would flag in there like, look, you look terrible. You're you're not yourself. What's going on? And I would just like, look, I just need another week. We're nearly there. We're nearly had this figured out. So back then, I wish I could say I had great mental health practices and stuff. I didn't. I had nothing. I didn't even know I was having a panic attack that day until it came upon me. I didn't know what that was. I didn't know what anxiety was. I had become so comfortable with that feeling of anxiety. I just thought it was a normal day to day guttural feeling. I would be sick to my stomach. If a phone call came in or when we send a patch out, within the first hour, if I get a phone call comes in, it means something wrong or the count was wrong. So, I was so far down that hole, it became the norm for me. No phone call was a good day for me. I was like, oh, this is great. We're up and running. So, yeah, it took a long time for me to come out of that cycle and put some, I suppose, boundaries around that.
Yeah, like life can be hard and it can be stressful, but
Yeah.
it can be as stressful as much as you let it. And I think having some practices to fall back into immediately is what can help take you out of that stress. Like for me, you mentioned going to the gym. I think you did anyway. And that's
Yep.
something for me. Like, I have stressful weeks and stressful days where I don't even want to sit at the desk. But the moment I go to the gym, even though I hate going, and it's not even going to like to work out, it's just like it's even walking in the door and
Hmm.
just doing something for like 5 minutes. And I'll say I'll just go for 5 minutes, but then I'll end up staying for an hour.
Yeah.
Sometimes in the past I've just went for 15 minutes, but it's the act of doing, and immediately there's a shift, and such a change. And yeah, just the simple things like that, or even just going for a walk for me,
Yeah. 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 It's the routine of it nearly, it's 15 to an hour minutes in a day that's for you and it's not for somebody else. That's what I didn't have was I was at the beckoning call of anybody back then. And like, I suppose I give myself some credit where when you're a startup and you're so vulnerable and you're so eager for it to work, yeah.
Just on that comment that you said that you were at everyone's call, what does that mean?
Um, a supplier could have rang me at 11 p.m. at night time. I would have answered. And if they asked me to go to work, I would have went. Do you know? There was no, I never said no, is a good way of putting that. They could have rang me at 9 in the morning saying we needed it for 9:30, and I would have bled to get it over there for 9:30. I was,
Mm.
I was so eager and hungry for it to work that I completely lost, my own morals and my own routines. So whereas now if someone rings me at if I saw someone call me at 8 in the morning, I might answer, but I might be like, look, or an email comes in, I'll answer it in the morning. I have carved time for myself. Or if I'm training, phone's not with me. That's why we've spoken in the past, about jiu-jitsu. That's why I think I love jiu-jitsu so much initially, because you can't bring your phone onto the mats. And it was the first time ever I was away from my phone for an hour and a half, and it's such freedom. I was like, no one can ring me. They can't come in here. And there's someone else trying to kill me, so I'm not thinking
Mm.
about work. There's a man on my back trying to strangle me. So that's all I can think about right now. So I remember the first like few sessions of jiu-jitsu, I had such mental clarity when I came out of there. So I was like, geez, that's the first time in months where I've had an hour of pure focus and pure flow on something that's not work related. It was fitness, or it was like I get it now from running. But I distinctly remember jiu-jitsu initially in the early days. It was like that and surfing were the two sports where I couldn't bring my phone with me, and I was like, brilliant, fuck it, it's an hour where I am forced to be by myself, which I had no issues with, but at my own disposal.
Yeah, I agree. Sometimes we make ourselves too available.
100%, yeah,
Yeah,
a
yeah,
hundred
and
percent.
it's just like that message can wait till tomorrow. Like no one's
Yeah,
dying.
yeah, yeah. It's
There's
hard.
no urgency.
Like
Like,
it's hard to tell someone that when they're just started a business, and especially back then, every opportunity was such a big opportunity, and we were actually getting a lot of opportunities, which was a great thing. But then you're kind of like you're prone to like I have to take every call because what if it's the next golden ticket, or fuck it, the last two calls were great, or the last two emails led to X and Y. So if I say no now, we mightn't get the next thing, and yeah, I was in that zone, and like for the better, we got an awful lot out of it, but it was at my expense, realistically. Now, whatever, 6 years on, I've a much better control. I'm probably the opposite now, where it's harder to get in touch with me, or I'm less likely to reply, or I really will just carve out an hour a day. It's emails, and if it's outside those hours, you'll hear from me tomorrow, unless it's an
mhm.
emergency.
Yes, yes, yes. When I say food, what do you think of, Owen?
Food is different for me. Food is food is three kind of elements. Food is work, food is fuel and performance, and food is kind of like a love language too for me. So like it's my work and it's my job. It's used as a fueling and performance aspect in training, and then as a love language, I love to cook for others. So it's trying to balance those three is the hard part. um but yeah, they all play a different role. Food plays a different role in all those things. So it's lovely to be able to dip into each and every one of them, but it looks different. It can look different every day, which is nice.
Mm. I experienced you cooking. I was at an event last week.
Yeah,
You were our private chef, and obviously that's how we connected. And I was super impressed with your food. The platters and the dinners were amazing, And I was like,
thank you.
wow, this guy's really impressive. And obviously we connected then, and I seen the work that you're doing, and I was like, wow, I'd love to come on and have a conversation and dive into the food element itself, is and
Mm,
like how impactful food can be on our lives, and
yeah.
how impactful it's been on yours. And sometimes I think we can abuse food,
Hmm.
and we whatever, there's everything in balance, but something that I believe that we're leaning more towards now is like, as a society, as a species, we're becoming how are more aware of like the the how detrimental good food and bad food can be to our health.
Yeah,
And obviously that's something that you're big into and led you on to, you're working on TV, you
yeah,
know. How has that, or how have you brought yourself from where you started to TV? Like that's a big
yeah.
shift, and obviously it comes with a lot of hard work too.
Yeah, like I'm lucky in that it was never very forceful. Um, a lot of it was trial and error. So food, like the beginnings of food in my life, was that early teenager figuring out how to cook himself dinners. Then figuring out those dinners resulted in him losing weight and him feeling better, and using that as a tool to garner an audience and then probably give some value back. The thing for me was I'm really passionate about this. I love cooking. Where's the value for others then? And even from a business perspective, when I was looking at it, I was like, right, if this is going to work, where's the value? And there's two elements. You can physically sell dinner. Like my job is I physically cook for people, or I teach people to cook for themselves. And the teaching people to cook for themselves is probably a bigger potential platform. And that's where social media came in. And YouTube was my first medium and media. I was daily vlogging there, especially in like the early startup days when we were just starting off. I vlogged everything, and I loved it. Like it was a real creative process. Um, but it's the blueprint of how we started the business. But more importantly, it got me so comfortable on camera, talking on camera. I didn't know at the time, obviously. It was so daunting for me to turn a camera on, hear myself talk to a camera, hold a frying pan. It was embarrassing, and they're embarrassingly bad in the early days. But like anything, like you hammer the reps and the repetition, and you get better, and you become more comfortable with your own voice, and you get better at cooking on camera. So the social element of it, and the media side came from that. And I think with TV, I just sent an email to Virgin Media, like, look, I'm a young male chef. Here's 3 years worth of videos that I've done on YouTube. You can go through them. You can see them comfortable on camera. I have a plethora of recipes done already. Um, I was different at the time, where number one, there was very few young male chefs, but on TV it's very few, even to this day, outside of Dublin chefs. A lot of them are Dublin based. So I was this young fella from the countryside. I suppose a breath of fresh air. So just emailed them, cold emailed them. They're like, yeah, look, come up to have an audition. We'll see how you get on. Did the audition, and it was as if I was talking to my YouTube camera at home in my home kitchen. Didn't bother me. Lights and cameras had no effect on me at all. It was the exact same. I was so drilled in, like, where, even to this day when I do a segment, like, I know where the pot is, I know where my spoon is, I know where everything is, I know the flow of the recipe. I could be blindfolded and I could go through the motions. So I just had it nailed from really early days, and that was just from practice at home. So it gave me a real boost in when I got in. The TV was like, I got in and I got one. It was the week I turned. It was the week of my birthday. I remember it was in July, and then I did one that month, and then the next month they're like, "Yeah, come back up again." I thought that was brilliant. Like, geez, they want me back again. And then I was like, "Yeah, come twice next month," and then come 3 times 6 months later. I was like, "Yeah," come. And then now it was nearly weekly. Um, so it was really gradual, and you find your voice on that. But yeah, like, to answer the question, it has all been this gradual evolution of an initial passion that I had. My thing was always, if I stop enjoying it, then I'll stop. If I wanted a nice, easy, safe career, I'd have been a chemical and biochemical engineer. So that was always how I justified it to myself. I was like, right, I've purposely chosen the harder road here. So don't be giving out about it. And the day I wake up and I'm like, geez, I'm not enjoying this anymore, I'll change. I'll do something else. I'll do something different.
It obviously takes a certain amount of courage and bravery to just say, right, I'm going to contact the TV station, and I
Yeah.
believe in myself. Not everyone has that, you know. A lot of people doubt themselves when it comes to things like that, or they need to be encouraged into it. What was it about you that believed that you could, step up to that level?
Oh, blissful ignorance, probably, to a degree.
Sorry?
Um, I suppose a bit of blissful ignorance. I was young and I was probably naive. I was confident. I was definitely confident in my own ability. I knew. I always kind of said, like, if I get the opportunity, if I get my foot in the door, I know I'll be able. They'll keep me. Like, I know I'll be able to do this. Um, yeah, like, it's probably a accumulation of, I had been doing it for so long, and, like, even though I was only 21, I had been doing it since I was 17, 16, 17. So I had like 3 years. I wasn't getting big views on these videos, but I was just practicing and practicing and practicing. So I knew the product, which was me, was good, and I believed in it, and it was honest. It was a real, authentic product, and yeah, I think there was just this underlying confidence of, yeah, if I get a chance and if I get in here, I know myself. I'll give it everything and I'll work hard for it. That wasn't a fear of mine. So, it was out of my control then. And I
Mm.
suppose my thing was always, I've nothing to lose here. Like, bar public humiliation, I have nothing to lose outside of that. Like, the whole thing back then was like, worst case scenario, this doesn't work. It's fine. People will forget within a year. I'll go and be an engineer, and at least we tried. You know?
Mm. So I think that's so important is like to ask ourselves what is the worst that can happen, but also like what's the best that can happen. Sometimes we get caught up in the mind of like, oh, this person will think that, or I look like a failure, but then it's just like, well, I could also be a success, and this could
Yeah,
open many other doors. And it's a conversation actually I had with someone else today too. So if we give ourselves the chance first, doors can
yeah.
open.
That was my superpower back then. I remember I would always tell myself like, there's nothing to lose here. Like I'm big on pros and cons lists, and like the pros always outweighed the cons. It was like, granted, if it doesn't work, you there's 2 years of working on a business that's gone. So be it. X amount of money is gone into it's gone. So be it. The pros, then it works, and you do what you want to do, and you do what you love to do for the rest of your life. I really do think that was it gave me the edge for years and years. It still does. Like I still have that attitude. I probably have more to lose now than I did back then. Back then I was a student. I was early 20s, and for me, I wasn't even, I was single back then. I had no relationship. I was living with my friends in Limerick. No mortgage, no kids. I would always remind myself of these things. So then I had no excuse. Like, right, you have to give it a go. You have to go all in.
Mm,
So anytime like I'm faced with challenges, or if anything pops up, like I'll have that same conversation of, right, you know, what's to lose here? Like if it's not detrimental, and if it's not a serious, if it's not going to be a serious con, then it's really, really rare. It will outweigh the possible pro.
mm. You also talked about, uh, the importance of quality in your food, in your brand,
Yeah,
and sometimes quick made or ready-made meals, sometimes they lose that. How do you ensure that that quality is always met?
yeah. That's probably the hardest piece of the puzzle for scaling a meal prep business. So like our basis is fresh, wholesome, home cooked meals. Kitchen, it operates 5 to 7 days per week. Everything is cooked from scratch every morning. Um, and the food is always fresh. Sauces are made fresh, XYZ. And that's great, small scale and private catering, and it works really well for us. But if we were to scale and try and match these national level meal prep companies, I think you lose some of that quality. You no longer have the ability to produce fresh every day. You have to probably vacuum seal your meals to get longer shelf life. You have to add more preservatives, additives, colorings, maybe, binders and sauces, stabilizers. There's an awful lot of additional costs. And I don't mean financially, but just, cost of the meal being less wholesome, more processed. But that's necessary to scale and go beyond Limerick. So yeah, it's the double-edged sword I always sit on. It's like we want high quality, fresh food. It's nearly restaurant quality food that we can do. We've no seats, it's a production kitchen that sends out meals. But you always want more, and you always want to open your audience and open the meals to a bigger audience. And we have a good brand, and we have people that message from Cork and Galway and Dublin looking for dinners. So it's I suppose it's a piece of the puzzle I haven't solved yet. I can
Mm,
do it small scale here, and small scale is great. And I do love, like the event where I met you, the private catering and private chef. They're great because the food can be so is the sole focus point. It's 8 to 15 to 20 people that I do these private chef events for, and I can just focus on giving savage quality food, all made from scratch. And it's not a huge production line of, we need 100 meals, we need 100 bolognese and 100 curry and XYZ. So it's a different business altogether. Um,
mm.
both have their place.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. What did success look like to you when you started out, and how would you define success now?
Yeah. starting out, it was probably more monetary, realistically, because especially when you're bootstrapping a business and like it has to be monetary realistically for a while, because if it's not going to work, it's not going to work. Um, and yeah, I probably would have put more emphasis on the monetary goals originally at the, like we said a while ago, at the expense of my own freedom and pleasure in life, or you know, what my life looked like at the expense of, right, we have to get another gig, or we have to get X amount more per week, and if we get that, and like it's a double-edged sword again, it's a catch 22, because when you get there, then there's something else pops up, or it's not enough, or there's a new bill. So yeah, success, and I suppose like when you're building an audience, attention is what you want, and especially as a young single 20-year-old that is like newly confident in your body. As weird as that sounds, attention is like the currency. You're getting attention from your peers, you're getting attention from women on nights out, you're getting attention online. And that was my social currency, because I probably didn't socialize that much because I was so busy in the business. Socializing for me was through my phone, and you're getting validation from that, so I certainly wouldn't put weight on it now, but back then I would have, for sure. I would have. Success to me was a business that was making money, and was, for me, was getting lots of positive validation from social media, which is such a slippery slope, such a dangerous thing to put your worth on, because
Mm.
it's not real. It's just snippets of it was snippets of my life and the best parts of my life that people were seeing, and I was getting positive reinforcement from that. So number one, it's not really real, and number two, I'm held to that standard then from then on. Whereas now, I value I value my own free time an awful lot more. Probably because I have less of it, so when I get it, it's great. I value my training an awful lot. I value the relationships and the relationship that I'm in. And I think getting in a relationship completely took all of the need for the validation away. Um, and I think that's, to come back to what we first talked about there, was when I was making content and I was so engrossed in social media, that was at like the peak of my need for validation. And then when I got a girlfriend, and you have someone that loves you and you love them in your life, you don't actually need that validation much anymore. You're getting plenty of it in your relationship. So like, it sounds wrong to say I didn't care anymore, but I didn't need it as much. So I didn't give it the time. So that was the kind of period where I kind of fell out of love of making content. And it was purely just a perspective change that I needed. Was right, I'm not making content for validation anymore. I'm making it to add value, to build a brand, and to help people either cook or train or run or cycle or whatever. And when I found that flow again, the creative spark came back. It was perfect. But it took me about a year and a half, 2 years to find that. So yeah, success now is still a successful business. I'm not lost on the metrics, and I do love the metrics of the business, but having time for myself, freedom to go on holidays, freedom to spend time with my people, freedom to train, especially when you're doing triathlon. Training takes up so much time, and it can often be a pain in the hole. And you know, finding the enjoyment of it, because I think I was so tunnel visioned in early days. I forgot about everything outside of business. I was the business. I'm the face of the brand. So everything I did was being put into this. Whereas now I have a really nice thing of like that. Absolutely, it's here and it's still the same, but I can step out of that. I'm my own individual. I have my own life. If it was to go tomorrow, I'd be fine with it. I'd find another thing to do. I'd find another way. I certainly have less weight and have less pressure on myself, and like we said a while ago, I always go back to, am I still enjoying it? Is it still adding value? And is it still something that I want to do long term? And if it is, if it tick those boxes, then let's keep rolling.
Mm. So what I'm hearing there is, this journey of where you started, how you were so consumed, and then now it's like you've moved past that part of that attachment of your
Mm.
business, and if it's there, it's there, and if it's not, it's not. What is it in life now that has kind of brought in other elements of joy or things that you gravitate towards that are not business related?
Um, yeah, like I won't say I live a relatively simple life, but I do realistically. If I'm, it's my girlfriend Emma, spending time with her or doing stuff with her. It's spending time with my friends here in Limerick, our family, our training. Realistically, and then business is the fourth element there. I suppose relationships is family and Emma, training, and then my business. Um, and I get so much out of them. I suppose it's super fulfilling for me. And I suppose fitness there is a real broad term, but I get so much from it. Um, and it was rugby, and it transitioned to jiu-jitsu for about 6 years, and now it's transitioned into kind of endurance sports. But I get more out of endurance, and I learn more about myself in those worlds, that they have like huge transferable skills to business and to life. There's a huge amount of grit and like I'll say suffering in training, where when you come out of that and you go into your business, it's not that bad. You've already done a hard thing this morning, so what's this isn't this email or this phone call or this thing isn't that bad. The the exercise this morning was tough, so it certainly gives me a release and a relief, gives me a huge purpose, which I probably had lost in that kind of year or two. Didn't have a huge pile of purpose outside of business. I was purely just a business and no real purpose outside that. Whereas now there's huge purpose. There's purpose in everything. There's purpose in the food I eat, in the training I do, in the time I get to spend with friends and family. It's all purposeful. It has its own place, and it's given its own time, rightfully so.
Hmm. You talked about jujitsu and endurance sport giving you
Yeah.
elements of yourself that can be applied in business. So I only started jujitsu recently, and I've been in and out of it just because I've been busy and stuff. But like when I'm going
Hmm.
onto it, I'm like, for fuck's sake, I'm going in here with someone who's more advanced than me, and he's probably going to choke me out. But I'm like, no, let's take this on. I'm going to
Yeah.
go for this. I'm going to battle this. And again, it's that moment of presence. But there's always that little bit of fear of like, oh fuck, I'm going to get choked. But it's the encouragement of the courage that I take to go into that and say,
Yeah.
let's fucking go for it. And all them little moments build up like the compound and I
Oh
mean can
yeah.
help
Oh,
you in your life and everything in
absolutely.
business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the the willingness to start. I will use jiu-jitsu as an example, but every kind of sport is the same. For the first 2 years of that sport, you're not going to win much, and that's a super hard thing for someone with an ego to get over. And like there in the academy we have in Limerick, there's beginner courses every month, and there might be like they're always filled with like 30 plus people in these 6 week beginner courses, 4 week beginner courses, but the follow through rate is so small. I think from our group, this was when I was in college, two of us kept it on, and two of us are probably still there to this day. And like we'd see a huge beginner class, and then they'll integrate into our class, and then it'll trickle out and it'll trickle out, because it's a really, really hard thing to do, to be repeatedly, you know, choked or submitted or just not progressing. You have to leave your ego at the door, And I was always told from a friend who was in it for a long time, he was like, "You're going to be a nail for 2 years, and you're just going to get hammered, but your time to be the hammer will come. You just have to tough it out until then." And it's so true. But like, it sounds very dull. It's not. Like, loads of learnings in those first 2 years, But it's the willingness to be like, yeah, look, I'm going to go in here again now, and these fellas are going to absolutely ragdoll me, and I'm going to have no confidence. But so be it, because the day will come, and when you're 6 months in, a different fella, a new fella will come in, and you'll have the upper hand on this guy. But you won't have the inflated head because there's always someone better than you. And
Mm-hmm.
especially like I found when I was in the startup business, it's number one, it's solo, it's super individualized, and I spend a huge amount of time by myself alone. So it was the first time where I had a kind of a community element where there was other people there, because I wasn't playing team sports at the time. I was just in the gym, which is a quite an individualized sport. There's other fellas in the gym, but you mightn't necessarily train with them. So it was, this tribal, communal feeling where we're all in the same boat. We're all sweating. We're all hurting. We're all hurting each other. Um, and it was routine for sure. It was discipline, and it was acceptance of, yeah, look, there's no ego. I can't have an ego here. I just have to accept this and keep working on it. And any skills based sport, there's loads of learnings to tie them over. The resilience and the grit and the routine can all be implemented in other areas of life, in business, in relationships, and everything else.
Mm-hmm. That's for sure. I have a few questions for you.
Yep,
Now, these are just quick fire, right? So,
cool.
you didn't seem to accept the comment when I called you a chef, but I'm going to call you a chef anyway because you were last week to me. So, what's one ingredient you can't live without?
Um, quick fire. A good oil, a good extra virgin olive oil.
Mm-hmm. And what's the most memorable meal of your life and why?
That's so tough. That's not quick fire at all. The most memorable meals. Well, I'll tell you the meals I enjoy the most are probably big communal sit down meals with friends or family. Like I love like Christmas dinner because it's probably the one day a year where all the family are in. Or I live with my friends here in Limerick, so like every few months we'll have a big sit down meal. So I love them. There's not one that comes to mind, but it's probably an hour or an hour and 15 minutes where we're all super present. Where especially if I cook the food, there's a huge thing there of like there's gratification in you're feeding people, and that's what my love of food is feeding others. I'm not really great to feed myself, if I'm to be honest. I get by and I do what I have to do, but the love for food for me is feeding other people. Um, in terms of best meals, I love a good home cooked meal. I love going home to the farm past Henry. If they're eating food at home, I have one of Mam's dinners. It's nothing better. It's just nostalgia. It's the same dinner that was there when I was 15 years old. It's there probably tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. What's something about being a chef that people don't realize?
Uh, Organization and the prep. I think that's so misunderstood. Is like the sheets and lists and processes that go into cooking and the timing. So like for that event last week that you were at, I would have done one full day's prep of a full day of prepping all the ingredients, the sauces. Then I would have had to write out all of the timings and when things get cooked, when things get chopped, because they have to just come out of the oven to stay hot to be plated. So there's so much logistical planning that has to be done. Even when you're cooking dinner at home, like if you're making a curry for yourself tonight, you have to time, right? If I'm going to cook rice, that'll take probably 15 minutes. So, the rice goes on first, and then while that's cooking, then I'll do the chicken, and then I'll do the sauce, and they'll all finish at the same time. I'm not saying you will do that, but if you're to do an efficient cook, you're always planning, you're always timing things. Like cooking is just as much a timing and a preparation as it is a physical act of cooking food.
What's an unexpected lesson you've learned from food?
Food can be your best friend, or it can be a real um I won't say trigger, but it can be a real negative too if you over fixate on it. I think my first fixation on healthy food was really good for a certain period of time, but it became negative after a certain period of time because I was so fixated on it. So when I started losing weight, I was just counting my calories, eating really clean, and that was great because it got the weight off me. But I had a bad relationship with food. You lose the connection to food. Purely becomes a tool that you can control that will give you a good outcome. Sounding very engineer like. Um, and that tool can be misused, and that's where eating disorders come in, or disordered eating, which I would have had for a long time after that cutting phase, or you'd see it an awful lot in bodybuilding and people that excessively diet or a diet culture, is that you have this real, good, bad label with food. And if you're so fixated on food, a lot of things just become labeled as bad. And if you have them, you failed, or you bust your diet, or you're not good enough. And there's loads of really negative trigger warnings with food. So it's super important now to have this, I suppose, open approach that food is food, and your relationship with it has to be a good one. And everything is accessible in moderation, and once you're doing the right steps. So you know there's a good side and there's a bad side, and you have to find a happy medium that works for you, because both ends of the spectrum are bad.
Mm. It's interesting that you share that one because that's something that I went through. I went through a
Mm,
phase there of like super good food. I say super clean food for
yeah.
uh, quite a long while, and didn't eat any takeaways. I need it, but I was what I was doing was reconnecting with food. I didn't
Mm,
realize I was reconnecting with clean food, but it became an obsession in the sense I
yeah.
didn't want to eat anything else. But now I'm starting to find that balance now where like I can still get a takeaway.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
like a taco chip, I like a chicken burger, but
Yeah.
not all the time. That's
Yeah.
like a treat to me now, and I can appreciate it, but I'll still go back to like my clean eating during the week, and maybe at the weekend I'll get a pizza or things. So it's
Yeah.
been a
Yeah.
nice shift for me and a nice balance.
And that's super important. It's hard to find that. Like, it takes time to find what works for you, and especially if you have like obsessive tendencies, which I absolutely do. I do have obsessive tendencies. I obsessed over business. I obsessed over training, and especially in that early days when food was such a positive reward loop, I obsessed over food. And like that, then you become so um averse to anything that's not in that bracket, and that bracket was just clean food, no takeaways, no sugars, no processed foods. And like, it's near impossible. You can stick to that forever, but you will lose out in social settings. You'll lose out on probably some nutrients and minerals too, realistically. And you'll also lose out on just the joy of nice food. Like you said, there are takeaways and stuff. If you don't have them all the time, and you do have them, they're amazing, and they're often social things. They bring joy, they bring happiness. They're probably filling you up on things you don't have during the week, and there's nothing wrong with them. I think it's the most normal and healthy relationship in the world, is to be able to incorporate that in. But that takes time, and it takes a little bit of practice, and moderation. Even though it's a bit of a buzzword, it is the be all and end all when it comes to that kind of stuff. Is you having a good relationship that doesn't alter how you feel or how it makes you feel at the end of the day.
Yeah. So the next time we encounter each other, Owen, we'll have to go for a taco chip and a chicken burger.
Tackle chip, yeah, yeah, it's fine. No problem.
Owen, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much
That's
having
fine.
for
Yeah, not
coming
at
on
all, man.
today. Been great.
No, my pleasure, man. Thanks for the chat. I really enjoyed it.